Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name's Amber and in today's video I'm going to be talking about all the books that I've read over the last couple of months. So I've not filmed a video since January of this year and today is I think the 3rd of May, so it's been a long time. Basically I've had a lot going on in my personal life, so I've just not really been in the mood to film anything. I won't go into everything that's kind of been happening, but I did lose my granny earlier this year, which obviously was horrific for me and also my family. So yeah, I just didn't really want to film for quite a while, but that means that I've got lots of books to talk about. I've not spoken about any of the books that I've read since February, and I have read quite a few books since then. The other thing I just wanted to quickly mention is that I got a new phone, so the microphone that I normally use, it doesn't work in this phone, so I'm just going to use the normal audio for now. If I notice that it's like really bad, or if you want to tell me if it's really bad, then I will try and get a new microphone at some point. So I'm going to go through everything in date order. I just feel like that's the easiest. So the first book that I finished in February is The Killer Question by Janice Hallett. So I've read quite a few Janice Hallett books now. 2 of them I gave 5 stars. That was The Appeal and The Mysterious Case of the Alberton Angels. I DNF'd The Twyford Code. I didn't really like that one. And then I chose not to read The Examiner just because I didn't think I would like it. But this is her latest release and I picked this one up because it's set in a pub and it's focusing on like a pub quiz. And I just thought that would be very atmospheric and kind of reminiscent of The Appeal, which is like also very British. This is very much like her other books where it's told in mixed media. So in this one it's mainly text messages, pub quiz, score sheets, there's emails going back and forth, group chats, things like that. So the pub that we're focusing on is called The Case is Altered, which I would say isn't the catchiest name for a pub. So this book starts off with the pub being boarded up and the couple who were the landlords have gone missing. And we start off reading emails back and forth between, I think it's the nephew of this couple who is propositioning somebody to do a Netflix documentary about this pub and this case because it's very mysterious. So we're kind of following what the nephew is telling us. So as with all Janice Hallett books, this is very easy to read, very quick and fast paced. I liked the initial setup and the mystery. However, as I got further into the book, I did start to lose a little bit of interest. And I was thinking a little bit about this and I'm not sure that the mixed media worked as well in this book. I just felt like I wasn't as interested in these characters specifically. I wasn't getting the kind of pub vibes and atmosphere that I was hoping for. I wanted a really like cozy pub atmosphere and I just wasn't getting that because we were kind of held at a distance because everything we were seeing was from this mixed media or like snippets of texts or the pub quiz scores as opposed to like actually seeing the pub quizzes happen. You'd always see like the aftermath of it and like who won and that kind of thing. I suppose I should mention here that this whole thing revolves around this group who start showing up to the pub quiz who are basically winning every quiz. They're getting like near perfect scores and the other local residents who normally turn up to the pub quiz are getting quite annoyed and a bit resentful, and that's kind of the main plot line, which I didn't feel was enough to keep me intrigued. Part of me just didn't care how and why this group were so good at pub quizzes. There is also a murder in here, which I guess is the other mystery part of it. There were lots of twists and turns. Sorry, I feel like I am rambling because I've not filmed in ages and I don't know how to communicate about book. There were lots of twists and turns, which did surprise me. However, I did think that they were slightly far-fetched as well. And I can also recognise that some of her other books do this. You have to suspend your disbelief a little bit. I didn't really have an issue with it in those other books, but I did in this one. And I also kind of felt that it's starting to get a little bit formulaic. It's almost like Janice Hallett has typecast herself as like this kind of author where she has to do a mixed media mystery. There has to be some kind of reason why it's mixed media. And I just didn't really buy the whole concept of the nephew propositioning Netflix for a documentary. Like the actual formatting of his emails and like drip feeding the producer's information and the producer being like, oh my god, I can't wait for the next installment. Like it just didn't feel like a good enough reason for this to be mixed media. Oh, hey Titter. Okay. Sorry if you see my cats just wandering around me. So I did only give this book a 3-star in the end because I still enjoyed my time reading it. I just did feel a little bit more like critical of it than I have other Janice Hallett books. But it probably doesn't help that I was reading this kind of as things weren't going very well for my granny. And then I think I finished this like after she passed away, so my mind was a little bit in other places. But whilst I think that yes, that did have a part to play in my feelings towards this, I do think that even if I'd read this at another time, I probably would still feel similar. So yeah, for the first time ever, I'm questioning whether I'm going to read more of her books, just because if they are all going to be this kind of same overall premise, how many of them can I read before I'm totally fed up with them? I just had mixed feelings. The next book that I read is The Book of Guilt by Chidgey. So I read this one because my dad recommended it to me. He just finished it not so long ago and really enjoyed it. So in this book, we're following identical triplets who are living in this home. It's called a Sycamore Home. It's set in 1979 in England, and they are the last remaining residents in this home. And it's like a government scheme, but you're not really sure what the purpose of it is or was. These triplets are looked after by 3 mothers who they call Mother Morning, Mother Afternoon and Mother Night. Every day they have like a very structured life where they take their medication, they do their lessons, they do chores, but they've always been told that they're not well and that's why they have to take medication. But when they get better, they'll go to Margate where they can live the most perfect life on the beach, and that's where the rest of the residents have all gone. So I really loved the world building in this book. I loved the alternate history, but there was like an air of mysteriousness to it because you don't really know why these triplets are there. If they ever go to the local village, like where they live, they are very clearly disliked by that community. So there is a mystery to it, but I also just really liked learning about their everyday lives. We do also follow from the perspective of a government minister, and then we follow another perspective of this girl called Nancy, and we don't really know how her story comes into it until later on. So it was really well written, I would say, and I liked how it kind of slowly revealed the mystery throughout. There were a couple of twists and turns. Some of them were kind of predictable, but then there was definitely one that I did not see coming at all. And this book does feel very dark and very sad in some places, but it's not something that I would typically read. So I'm really glad that I did read it. I've given it 4 stars overall. There's not really anything I can say like negative against it. I just know that it didn't give me that like 5-star feeling, but it was really good and I would recommend it if you're into like a dystopian historical kind of vibe. Next up, we've got a book that I read on my Kindle that I didn't really enjoy, and I am sad about this one. It's called The Night Visitors and it's written by Jenn Ashworth and Richard V. Hirst. And the main reason why I'm sad about this book is because both of these writers are from near where I live, so I thought that would be kind of cool to like a book by local writers, but unfortunately I didn't really like it. So this is a novella and it's basically told in emails, and we're following 2 women. I think one of them's called Alice. She gets in contact with a distant relative called Orla, who's an older woman who used to be a very acclaimed writer, and Alice gets in touch with Orla because they have a shared ancestor called Hattie, who was a silent film actress back in the day. She was involved in, well, her family were massacred basically, and Hattie herself went missing from the crime scene. They don't know what happened to her. She's never been seen since. So Alice decides that she wants to write a book about this massacre and about what could have happened to Hattie. So she's kind of getting in touch with Orla to appeal to her as a relative in the hopes that they might kind of come together to work on this book, and it leads them into like a bit of an investigation into what could have happened to Hattie. So the premise sounds really good and like something that I would absolutely love, but unfortunately I just didn't really vibe with this one. The emails are written to each other in a very formal style. They were very like info dumpy emails, very telling what's just happened, giving like a big life history, because I suppose there has to be a way for the authors to communicate the story to us, but when it's strictly over email, it is difficult. So I found that a little bit jarring, I suppose. And I don't know, we were just like kept at a distance because we were always being told about what was happening after the fact. So if Alice went to go and like see someone about this mystery, then she would email Orla afterwards and say, oh, by the way, this happened. So you didn't really feel like you were super involved in the mystery itself. And then as we got to like the second half of the novella, things started to feel a lot more like a psychological horror than a mystery. Things were just starting to spiral in ways that I didn't really like, and it just wasn't like the direction that I would have wanted it to go in. I didn't like the ending. I just thought it was quite ambiguous and it wasn't very satisfying. I ended up giving this book like a 2.5 out of 5 just because I didn't think it was like a bad book. It just wasn't to my taste. So the next one I read after The Night Visitors was another one that I unfortunately didn't really like. This one is called What Boys Learn by Andromeda Romano-Lax, I think. This is one that I got on NetGalley as an ARC. It's about a woman called Abby who's a school counsellor. 2 of the girls in her school go missing, or found dead or presumed dead, I can't really remember. And she starts to suspect that her own 15-year-old son, Ben, may have had some kind of involvement with these girls because Ben is showing some like really worrying views on women. She keeps catching him listening to podcasts and YouTube videos that are very like incel culture, right wing. And I thought this was going to be kind of like adolescence, seeing how Abby is going to try and like drag her son away from this culture whilst also like investigating the mystery of these girls' disappearances. But I don't know, this book, like, it started off really well. The setup was good and I was really enjoying it. But then the middle section of the book was so slow paced, like nothing really was happening. And there were some sections of the book that I just felt like didn't need to be there. There was a whole kind of will they won't they romance with her ex-boyfriend who was a police officer who was really not very likable. To be honest, I think that everything to do with him as a plotline could have been scrapped and it would have had like no impact on the story. It just kind of seemed to flounder throughout the whole middle section. And I almost DNF'd it a couple of times, but I did stick it out because I did want to know what was going to happen in the end. And even though it did eventually pick up at the end, like the last section was more fast paced, there were actually things happening, but by that point I was so like checked out of this book. I didn't care about these characters, I didn't really care what was going to happen, and I didn't like the actual reveal itself. Like, I just questioned a lot of these characters' motivations. I just wasn't really buying into the story that I was getting. Yeah, I didn't like this one, unfortunately. I gave this one 2 stars in the end because I was so checked out. This isn't one that I would necessarily recommend. Let's move on to the next book, which I absolutely loved. So finally, some good news. This one is called The Body in Question by Jill Ciment, or Ciment, I'm not sure how I would say that. I think I put this one on my 26 books to read in 2026 because when I read the plot summary for it again recently, it really stood out to me as something that I could love. So at the start of this book, we are introduced to a woman who's just been given jury service. She gets put on a 3-week sequestered trial, like a murder trial. I didn't know that being sequestered was a thing, but it's basically where throughout the duration of a trial, a jury will have to stay like in a hotel together. They won't really be able to have regular contact with family or anyone else from the outside world. They're not allowed to look at TV or news coverage. So anyway, basically this woman is put on this jury and she's told that she has to stay in this hotel for 3 weeks with the other jury members. She's only referred to by her like jury number at this point as well, and so is everybody else. But basically the murder trial is involving a young boy, like a toddler, believed to have been killed by one of his twin sisters. Very quickly into this case, our main girl starts a love affair with one of the other jury members, but she's married. So she's married to like a much older guy. I think she's in her maybe like 50s or late 40s, but her husband is quite a bit older than her. So she's kind of seeing this as her like last chance to have a dalliance with somebody before she like gets too old to be doing kind of things like that, which is an interesting position to take. So it's about this relationship and the effects that it has on her ability as a juror, how it's going to affect her marriage. We do see a little bit of like the aftermath of this trial as well. For some reason, I just loved this book. I just really liked our main character. And even though there's infidelity in this book, which is something that I don't normally like, and I know a lot of other people don't normally enjoy, for some reason, I was really invested in this affair. I just really liked seeing our main character's perspective on like why she was doing this. It meant that the trial was like less of a focus in the book, and I didn't even mind. Like, that is normally something that would really irritate me. I just really enjoyed everything about this book. I think it kind of came to me at the right time as well. There were quite a lot of parts of this book, minus the infidelity that is not involved, but a lot of the things that happen in this book were also kind of relevant to my life at that point. It just felt like it came to me at the perfect time. I cried at the ending. I was not expecting that ending, and it really did raise a lot of questions about like the morality of that situation, not only for like our main character's husband, but also for the trial. The Goodreads summary of this book really does spoil like everything that happens. All I knew going into it is that these jurors were going to have an affair, and that was it. So I would really just go into it as blind as that. I don't know what it was about this book. It just like really hit like a personal thing for me. I felt really connected to it. It was just really interesting and I loved it, and I've given it 5 stars. There was literally nothing I could say that was wrong with it, and the fact that I cried at the end, I was like, oh, this is obviously special to me. Next up we have a non-fiction which I have been reading for quite a while. It's Capitalist Realism, Is There No Alternative by Mark Fisher. You might be able to tell there's a lot of tabs in here. I really enjoyed the experience of reading this book. It's only 100 or so pages. Oh, it's not even 100 pages. It's literally like 87 pages. So I added this to my TBR back when the curriculum stuff, like personal curriculum, was going around on TikTok. I just really wanted to read a book about sociology again. I did it for my degree. I just kind of missed exercising my brain a little bit. So in terms of like an academic text, it's definitely very readable and accessible. However, that didn't mean that it was easy to read. It's kind of split into essays. So I'd read an essay, didn't really understand what was being talked about, and then I'd read it again, but this time underlining bits that I really liked, or just writing my thoughts as I went along, now that I kind of knew what the point of the essay was. And I think I basically annotated like every single page of this book. There was always something that was just like a really good paragraph, or something that I just had to write something in, just to kind of like explain it to myself as well. I didn't feel like there was any point in just kind of rushing through this one and not really understanding what he was trying to say. And I really just enjoyed the process of like actually engaging with a book and thinking of like my own thoughts and my own like examples of what was happening. Some of my favourite parts of this book were when he talks about bureaucracy and how there are so many different like admin roles and tasks that need to be done in certain jobs. He worked in education, but he also mentions public services. I liked seeing things that I could see in real life. Like I could understand exactly what he was talking about, the amount of like additional admin tasks and quality assurance tasks that are added on, and like auditing stuff. And he talks about the irony of that being such an integral part of our capitalist society. When that was being brought in and sold as like the ideal way of living, part of that was to kind of get rid of all that bureaucracy, and we've kind of gone the opposite way. But he also makes a great point about mental health, and he says that we as a society have made mental health such a personal issue, as in people are blamed for their own personal problems as to why their mental health is bad, but it should be a political issue, where if you're dealing with people who have bad mental health, so much of it is to do with, I don't know, like poverty or addiction, homelessness, lack of opportunity, and so much of that is a structural issue. That is not something that an individual can easily resolve for themselves. I suppose the overall point of this book is to explore the myth that capitalism is the ultimate goal, that it's the only thing that works, and this is like the peak that we're ever going to be in society. We're never going to have another system. And he questions that, and he's saying like, we've been told and fed that that is the reality, even though most of us hate capitalism, and even though capitalism itself kind of perpetuates that idea. We all share the idea, but we don't do anything about it. But he's trying to say that things could change if we start thinking more critically and engaging with politics. And yeah, it was definitely worth the read, even if it did take me quite a while and it did kind of stretch my brain. But yeah, I would definitely say if you're struggling with any book like this, maybe try giving it like a read, understand what you can, and then give it a second read to really like hone into it now that you know like the overall message that it's trying to say. Just do it like chapter by chapter or like essay by essay or whatever. I do feel like that definitely helped. So yeah, that was Capitalist Realism. I've not rated it just because it doesn't feel kind of right to rate it. I did really enjoy it and would recommend it. Next up, I read a very highly anticipated book, and that was My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. The reason why this was highly anticipated is because I've previously read 4 of Alice Feeney's books, and I'd seen a lot of people really loving this one. So I listened to it with my Spotify audiobook hours. Basically, we're following this woman who goes out for a run one morning. After her run, she comes home. She tries to open the door with her key and her key doesn't work. She knocks on the door and this woman answers, who looks kind of like her, and is like, "Who are you?" And she's like, "I live here, like my husband lives here." Her husband comes to the door, he's like, "Who are you? Like, this is my wife. You Don't Live Here. 3 of them I gave really high ratings, and 1 of them I gave like a 2-star. So she's like locked out of her own house. We don't know what the hell's going on. So we follow a couple of different perspectives around this mystery. It was definitely very fast paced. It was very engaging and intriguing, and I did love listening to it. The actual listening process was very enjoyable and I had a lot of fun. However, when we got to the end and I was actually thinking about like the book, the amount of plot holes in here is crazy. It was actually getting me quite annoyed, like how much of it was just kind of bad. Like, I suppose I did notice it a little bit throughout, like when the reveals were coming, but I didn't really mind because I was enjoying the book. And then it's not until I got to the end and I was thinking about all of the things that just didn't make sense that it started to annoy me that I'd enjoyed the book, because I was like, but this is like a silly book that doesn't make sense. There's so many plot holes. And I ended up writing a Goodreads like kind of rant review on it, basically just saying like all the things that I'd noticed that just did not make sense. But I will leave that review if you want to go and read it, just if you have read it or you're not interested in reading it and you want to just see like what my specific issues were. But I suppose the main overarching thing for me is that this book is written in first person, but there were so many times where you figured out that a character was unreliable and had basically just like straight up lied in a way that just like didn't make sense. Like, why? Other than to be like a shocking reveal. I thought if it was written in third person, it would make more sense. Like, if a character was lying to another character about something from their backstory, then that would make sense. Like, I normally quite enjoy an unreliable narrator, but I feel like you have to be like let into it as well. Like, there has to be a valid reason as to why that person is unreliable for it to make sense. But if they're just like lying to you for no reason other than for it to be a reveal later on, it just felt like a bit lazy. There was one thing in particular that I thought was like borderline offensive that was like a big plot hole, which I have mentioned in that review. I've given this like a 2.5 because I did enjoy reading the book. My enjoyment would probably be like a 4-star, but the actual book on an objective level I feel like wasn't great, like was not a 4-star quality in my opinion. But yeah, I don't know where I stand now with Alice Feeney, because the most recent 2 books that I've read from her, so this one and Daisy Darker, I gave Daisy Darker a 2-star, but it's also that the 3 I really liked were when I was really into thrillers, and I'd not read tons of thrillers at this point, so I was enjoying them a lot more in general. Okay, next up we have Sky Daddy by Kate Folk. Funny story about this book actually. So I was reading it on my Kindle. I was at work, but I was not in my normal office. I lost my Kindle. I didn't know where I'd put it. I thought I'd lost it at this place. So I text my colleague saying like, oh, can you please ask the security if they've found my Kindle or if someone's handed it in? Anyway, luckily my Kindle was there, but they didn't know how to like prove that it was mine because there's like nothing on it. It's just a black Kindle. I said, here's how you turn it on. It'll probably pop up with like the book that I was reading. And she was like, oh, what book were you reading? I was like, Sky Daddy. And she was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Like, I don't really know this colleague that well. I saw her after and I was like, it's not a weird like fetish book. It's about a girl who like has a fetish for planes, but like not in a serious way. And anyway, it was very difficult to explain that it's more of a weird girl lit fic book than like an erotic plane thing. So that was fun for me. That's basically what this book is about. We're following a main character called Linda who has a fetish for airplanes. Her ultimate dream is that she'll be on an airplane and will love her so much that it will crash with her in it, and then they can be kind of united in death, and that is like their marriage. And her whole life is kind of revolved around going on planes. She doesn't even like travel to see anywhere. It's literally just so she can ride planes and hopefully one will crash with her in it. She works as a content moderator and she's like the best one at her job. She has one friend at work. She's not like the best friend that Linda could ask for. They're very different. You do learn more about their friendship dynamics and it is quite an interesting friendship that they have. And I did find it an interesting book. I thought it was really funny in places. It is definitely like a weird lit fic book and I liked it. However, I didn't love it as much as I thought I would. Like, this is one of the books that I was gonna buy physically because I thought I would love it. I loved Kate Folk's short story collection called Out There. So I thought this one could be like a 5-star for me, but I've given it a 3.5 in the end because it was just kind of okay for me. Linda isn't the most likable character. She does some things that are not great because all she's focused on is these planes, and you do see her become more and more unhinged as the book goes on, and I just wasn't sure I knew like where it was going. Like, there wasn't a ton of plot to keep it going. It was more of like a character study almost, but like not really. I don't know how to describe it other than it was kind of plotless and you're just following like her daily life. But I did really love the ending actually. I thought the ending was great. It was very fitting. So yeah, I ended up feeling kind of lukewarm about it just because I expected to love it a lot more than I did. I just didn't really have much of a connection to it. So I gave it, 3.5. I liked it slightly more than average. It did disappoint me slightly. It was kind of a 5-star prediction. I have been anticipating this for quite a while and I've seen that a lot of other people have really enjoyed this one. So I couldn't help but feel slightly underwhelmed. Next up is another book that I loved, and this one is Exiles by Mason Coile. So this is a horror novella and we're following a 3-man crew on their way to Mars where they're going to start this colony. Already on Mars are these 3 robots who are building the base for them to be ready for when they get there. They land and they find that the base is half destroyed, and these 3 robots, they're a little bit different to what they would expect them to be like. They have given themselves like normal names. One of them is missing and they seem to be a lot more like sentient than they would have hoped. And it's kind of a mystery around how much have these robots had to do with what's happened, or is there something a little bit more alien around what's gone on. I really enjoyed this book. There was a lot of tension and suspense. There was lots to think about around the relationships between the humans and the robots. So the humans, well, 2 of the humans are very hostile towards the robots. So I really enjoyed the conversations around that and around whether they should be treating the robots as they are, and how is it that they've become more kind of sentient or self-aware whilst they've been on Mars. But then obviously we have the mystery around what happened with the base, what's happened with this missing robot, and things start to get a little bit bloody and a little bit horrifying. And I just really enjoyed it. It was such a perfect short novella. There's a specific image that happens like later on that will haunt me forever, and I loved the ending. The ending was great, and I would definitely recommend it if you like sci-fi, space, horror, but also with like a psychological horror to it as well. On to another one that unfortunately didn't really like. This is Class Trip by Emmanuel Carrère. I loved the mustache by this author. Gave that one 5 stars last year or the year before. It's a real like standout favourite of mine. So I thought I would read another book by this author. I've given this one like 2.5 stars as well. So in this one, we're following a young boy called Nicholas, and he's gone on a 2-week-long class trip to a skiing resort. But his dad is very overprotective and he didn't want him to go on the bus with the rest of his class in case the bus crashed, and he said, I will take him myself. So when he gets there, Nicholas has not only missed the journey to the ski trip with the rest of his class, which kind of puts him back a little bit, but he also realises that he doesn't have his stuff with him. So he thinks he's left it in the back of his dad's car. He expects that his dad is going to be back with it soon. At least that's what Nicholas thinks. But his dad doesn't show back up. And the first half of the book is about Nicholas's like childlike worries, overactive imagination, and like what could have possibly happened to his dad. And then we learn that a boy has gone missing. So there's a little bit of mystery around that as well. It doesn't focus on it that much, to be honest. We are just stuck in Nicholas's perspective, which I think is why I didn't love this book. Because to be honest, I just didn't really like Nicholas as a character. Even though he's like a young boy, bless him, I just didn't really like being stuck in his head. Not only is he completely like not involved with this trip, most of the time he's just kind of like being looked after by these teachers. I wasn't really excited by it. I did find it a little bit boring, but it does kind of progress to a dark ending, but it's not as like dark as I would have wanted because we are stuck with Nicholas, who is a child. He doesn't really understand what's going on around him, and he's just so like removed. Like I honestly didn't feel any atmosphere around this school trip. It's like he's not even on it. It just didn't really work for me, which is a shame because, yeah, like I said, I loved the mustache. I will still read more from this author because I think if this book had been written from maybe like a couple of different perspectives, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. It's another one where I don't think it's like a bad book. I think most people kind of enjoy this book from what I've seen on Goodreads, but yeah, it just did not work for me. Next up we have my next attempt at reading a thriller and this is You Killed Me First by John Mars. John Mars is quite a reliable author for me. I did do a taste test reading vlog a long time ago now where I read I think 4 of his books and I gave 2 of them 5 stars. And I've enjoyed quite a lot of his other books as well, and I'd seen that this one was getting really good reviews. In this one we're following 3 different women. One of them has everything. She's just moved to the neighbourhood. She is gorgeous. She's got an amazing husband. They are building this yoga studio together. The other woman has lived in this neighbourhood for a long time. She used to be famous, but she's now kind of irrelevant, but she still very much acts like she is the centre of the universe. She's very mean. She's not very likeable. And then the third woman is kind of a normal woman who also lives in this neighbourhood, who has been friends with the ex-celebrity for quite a long time. And the book starts on bonfire night, where a woman wakes up bound and gagged in the middle of a bonfire that is currently alight and is going to burn her alive. And then we go back 11 months and start following these 3 women to see like what led up to that. It was a fun read. It was a fast-paced read. I feel like I say this when I talk about any thriller as if that's not literally like the point of a thriller. It did keep you like wanting to read more, because as you flipped perspectives there was usually some kind of reveal or like something that made you want to go back to that perspective. There were lots and lots of twists and turns, many of which I did not see coming. There was a trope used here that I normally do not like in thrillers whatsoever, but in this case I kind of liked it, just because it, I don't want to say made sense to the story, but it seemed like more of a trauma response than like used as a plot device. I'll leave it at that. And I did like how it all came together in the end. So overall I would say that like this was a fun read and it was a good read, but it's not like the most memorable thriller I've ever read. I've given it 3.5 stars because again it's that like I liked it more than average. However, I didn't love it. I just feel like every thriller I read nowadays is like a 3 or a 3.5. Okay, we're almost there, guys. The next one I read after that is Rejection by Tulathimutte. I absolutely adored the first like 60%. It's basically split into 7 stories, interconnected stories, where we're following a different person in each one pretty much. And the first 4 were like perfection. 5 stars. I loved it. In the first story we're following a guy who is like the most extreme feminist in the sense that he's dedicated his whole life to being a feminist. He's studied gender studies. However, he's never had a girlfriend and he thinks that it's because he has narrow shoulders and doesn't have any other kind of self-awareness of what could really be going on. This whole book is very like satirical. Like you're reading it and it's very funny, very clever, and you can see exactly why this guy is not getting girls, but he just keeps getting rejected. The next one is about a woman who sleeps with her male best friend, but then it doesn't really go anywhere and he then like rejects her, doesn't want to like be in a relationship with her, and she takes this very badly. Then I think in my favourite one, we are following a Thai American guy who is gay, but his sexual desires are very like intense, but he feels too ashamed about it. He can't really get what he wants and he doesn't want to go out there and ask for it because it's a bit messed up. And oh my god, that story is so messed up. I was laughing my head off. I was like screaming at some of that part. It was insane, but so like well written. It was just viscerally good. Then we're following a guy who's very reminiscent of like a podcast manosphere guy. He owns startups. He thinks he's like the most high value man ever, and he's basically asking, I think it's written like a Reddit post, like he's asking for advice on what to do in his relationship. And again, that one's so funny. It's so full of satire. This whole book is full of like deep internet lore, so much social commentary. Like the author is clearly so intelligent. And then unfortunately it started to drop off a little bit for me. In the 5th story we're following a character who I just found very unlikable. The other characters are all unlikable, but in like a funny satirical way, but I just really did not like the character in the 5th story. They are like a super reclusive person. It was the longest story I think, and it was just the one that lost my interest a little bit. The 6th one was like completely different to everything else in the book, and then the 7th one very like self-referential, again very satirical, but it literally just went over my head. Like I didn't really understand it. It felt like at that point the book was too clever for me. It lost me. It really did. So the first half, or the first like 2/3, was so good, and this was like a 5-star. I could not wait to keep reading it. It was just like super funny, well written, sharp. I've never read a book that covers internet culture better than this one. I've rated it a 4-star overall because I absolutely love that first part. So if you've not read this book yet, I would still recommend it. I've seen so many glowing reviews. For the people that get it, they really get it. And there are a couple of us I've seen that just don't get that last bit. Overall, I would still very much recommend this one. And then the last book, the one that I've finished most recently, is No Offence But by Gina Martin. This is a non-fiction. As the tagline says here, it's how to have difficult conversations for meaningful change. So each chapter is like a different quote or something that somebody will say in response to a debate about social issues, something that's kind of problematic to say. So some of the topics that it covers in here are boys will be boys, to play devil's advocate in response to discussions on misogyny, children shouldn't be allowed to transition because what if they change their minds, not all men, I don't do politics, I don't see colour, things like that. So most of these essays are written by Gina Martin herself, but interspersed in between her chapters are chapters from guest authors. One thing that I did find really interesting about this book is that there were some chapters that I didn't feel like I fully resonated with, but that's because that isn't my experience, and it's not easy for me to kind of like nod along and be like, yep, completely get that. And it did like challenge me on my own thoughts and my own views. Not that I think I have like harmful negative views, but there's always room to improve, I would say, and to reflect on some of your own subconscious biases or your own initial reactions to things. And one of the things that it talks about in here is that people respond defensively, like they do not want to be lumped into a category of people who are perpetuating harm. For example, it talks about how men might react defensively if pulled up on harmful things towards women. Similarly, white people might react defensively if pulled up on some of their microaggressions or ways in which they are not challenging racism and things like that. So I definitely did feel like challenged, but in a good way. I think that's the whole point of this book, is to just be more mindful of what we say, what we think, to be more confident in challenging other people on their perhaps harmful views as well, but in a way that is also empathetic to an extent, obviously. What I would say is that I don't know if it's like equipped me to feel that, like to feel more confident pulling people up on things or like winning a debate about this. I don't think it's given me that, but it has given me a bit of food for thought around my own like reactions to some of this book. It's definitely helpful in that sense. However, I would say that I did start to get a little bit like fatigued by the end of this, just because it's not like heavy, but a lot of the messaging is kind of the same. I have a Notion page, it's only like a private one, but I did write like my thoughts on like all of these essays on there. Again, if it's a non-fiction, I kind of like to sit with them a bit longer and try and, I don't know, like actually engage with them and think about my own thoughts. I've been doing that recently and I've really enjoyed the process of it. So I did find that a really useful thing to do, was to just kind of like blurt out all my thoughts, write down some of the information that I found helpful. I did enjoy my experience reading this. Again, I've not rated it, but I would recommend it if you're interested in social issues and learning how to be a better human, basically. So that, my friends, is everything I've read. I've been filming for the longest time, so I apologise if this video is very, very long. Hopefully you've all been well since I've been away. I'm not sure like when my next video is going to be. I'm just going to play it by ear, to be honest. I keep doing schedules for myself and it clearly doesn't work. Life just gets in the way. But yeah, I will try my best to not leave it as long next time. Please do let me know what you've been reading, what you've been loving. And like I said, if you've got any recommendations for good thrillers that are going to blow my socks off and not just leave me with like that 3-star feeling. So yeah, thank you so much for sticking around, especially if you've made it this far to the end. Please do give this video a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you want to see more from me. And I will hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!